Some of the toughest regulations Wall Street has ever seen are about to be put into place. The Senate passed a major overhaul of the financial industry, and now the bill awaits the president's signature. Alexis Christoforous has more from the New York Stock Exchange.
Change is coming to Wall Street.
Conference report is agreed to.
The Senate voted to approve the long-debated crackdown on the financial industry.
We're giving Wall Street the strongest oversight it's ever had, not to stifle it, but to safeguard us.
The final bill weighs in at over 2,000 pages. It takes on the issue of too big to fail, meaning regulators will have the power to break up large financial firms that pose a risk to the economy. It also creates a new agency to protect consumers' financial transactions, and it cracks down on high-risk trading at the banks. The goal is to protect the nation from another financial meltdown. The House already passed the bill, and President Obama plans to sign it into law next week.
Because of this reform, the American people will never again be asked to foot the bill for Wall Street's mistakes.
Wall Street knew change was coming, and it waited about a year for the final version. In the end, it's actually less restrictive than it started out.
We have answers now. The transparency is there. We know what the rules and regulations are going to be moving forward, so that brings investor confidence back to our markets.
Only 3 Republicans supported the bill. One opponent dismissed it as a legislative monster.
Unfortunately, the bill does very little to make our financial system safer.
Even the bill's most passionate supporters admit change will be slow. It's one thing to have the new rules on paper. It's another to actually enforce them. Alexis Christoforous, CBS News, Wall Street.
President Obama is calling passage of the financial reform bill a victory, but recent polls show the president's popularity is sliding. So will this be enough to turn things around for him? For more, we are joined by reporter Jonathan Allen from Politico. Jonathan, thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jonathan. So will this be enough to turn things around for the president?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see what the poll numbers look like. But, you know, the financial regulatory reform, the Wall Street reform, is something that is probably a little harder to explain to most folks than some of the legislation that the White House has had trouble communicating on. Healthcare, most people get. They either have it or they don't. They like it or they don't. They can kind of get into that sort of a bill. But what we're talking about here with the financial regulatory reform gets very, very complicated very, very quickly. And so it's a harder thing to sell other than to say we're not going to let the system collapse again. It's harder to make it clear how that translates into the average person's daily life, particularly before the midterm election. Of course, the president has a little bit more time on his hands, politically speaking. He won't be up for re-election for another 2.5 years.
Well, Jonathan, what was holding up the bill? What was in it that it wasn't passed in July 4th? What was it that kept it going for so long?
Well, this is just very complicated legislation. It had bounced around a lot. There was an opportunity, I think, that the administration began to sense earlier this spring that they might be able to push a little bit harder, maybe a little bit more to the left, if you will, to try to get some tighter regulations. There had been some effort in the Senate to get bipartisan agreement. That fell apart. The White House decided to push hard in that one direction, and it really just takes a little while to get legislation done. And then at the very end, Senator Robert Byrd's death, the longtime senator from West Virginia, delayed it. A little bit of cold feet on the behalf of a couple of Democrats delayed it some, and the inability to get any Republicans early on had delayed it. Now we see in the final passage that there were 3 Senate Republicans, the 2 senators from Maine and Scott Brown, the new senator from Massachusetts, who jumped on board, and just 1 Democrat who voted against Russ Feingold of Wisconsin.
Jonathan, why only 3 Republicans? What was the sticking point there?
Well, I think what you're going to hear from Republicans is that the bill, while aimed at trying to reduce the risk of future financial problems and at trying to address some of that, Republicans are saying that it actually will end up hurting consumers, hurting people who want to get money, particularly hurting businesses that are having trouble with credit freezes. I think they believe that this is over-regulatory, that it will end up basically squeezing business. And so that's the argument. You already heard Republicans today calling for its repeal, including the minority leader in the House, John Boehner of Ohio.
Jonathan, the president was at a Michigan car factory on Thursday, and he was telling people that he wants to be held personally responsible. Here's the video of him touring the car factory in Michigan. He said he expects to be held accountable by people who can't find jobs. Is this smart politically to admit something like that?
I think that you, as President of the United States, you're going to be held responsible for the economy, whether or not you created the conditions that you're in, whether or not you have the ability to affect them. So I think, smart or not, the president is ultimately going to be held accountable.
And the oil, let's talk about the oil spill. The oil gushing has now been stopped. Is this good news for President Obama, or is this still an uphill battle for him?
Absolutely. I think it's good news for everybody. Good news for BP, good news obviously for the residents of the Gulf, good news for the president. But, you know, this is also a situation where, as if a limb had been chopped off and you put on a tourniquet and you stop the bleeding, that doesn't mean that, that the injury is gone away. It doesn't mean that that's the end of the process. There's still a lot to be done. I mean, remember, this gusher had been going since April 20th, which is a couple days after the NBA playoffs started. They went through all of those. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time, and it will go on for months and years, unfortunately, for the residents of the Gulf.
All right, thank you for joining us this morning.
Take care.